Welcome to Coastal Conversation, episode 18. Thank you for listening today. And as always, a reminder, Colossians 4:6 says, let your conversation be always full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone. That is our goal today. Well, our guest today is a repeat offender. She is my friend, so I can do this to her. Jenni Starling is a licensed marriage and family therapist right here in Alabama, Lower Alabama. She specializes in adolescent couple and family therapy, and we'll talk a little bit about that in just a minute, and provides clients with a safe, supportive environment that supports the whole person, the mind, the body, the soul, and the spirit. But before we begin our conversation with Jenni today, I just wanted to take a quick second to remind you that if you are listening to our podcast today, July the 31st through August the 25th, we are in a sermon series here at Coastal Church entitled Starving. Well, during this series, we are looking at sins and dangerous patterns in our life that may be out of place or even out of control, that we need to use these next 21 days of prayer and fasting to redirect those patterns or those sin behaviors in our lives so that we can become more like Jesus and be the person that He has created us to be, whole body. If you haven't, I want you to visit our website today, coastalchurch.tv, and I want you to register for Pastor Chad's 21-day devotional series that he is writing. You're going to get an email and a text every day that take you to this devotion that you can read that's going to help you over these 21 days to redirect these patterns in our lives that are unhealthy and that are keeping us from our full potential in Christ. So moving forward in today's topic, I believe that today's topic pairs so well with our starving series because not only are we starving things in our life, and that requires limits, right? We are going to talk today with Jenni about boundaries. Now, boundaries is a word that we don't often like to hear, or for that matter, live in. We don't like boundaries. Pastor Chad talked about that even this last Sunday in our gluttony sermon, where we learned about gluttony, and anything can be gluttony in our lives. It doesn't have to be food or alcohol or drugs or anything like that. We can do gluttony with exercise or social media. Whatever in our life is out of order and doesn't have a boundary around it, relationships can be gluttony. So we are going to look at starving out those things over the next 21 days. So I wanted to bring Jenni on and talk about boundaries because it pairs so well with what we are learning. She's going to help us understand boundaries today, but let me warn you about this. This is just an introduction. She's literally just like whetting our appetite. So this word boundaries may be new to you. You may have never heard about the concept of boundaries, or you may have and thought, I don't need them, I'm good. And then something that Jenni says today may trigger something in your life that you realize, oh, I really probably need a boundary around this relationship or this situation in my life. Well, we're going to talk about that. We're going to get to the bottom of all of it. So let me encourage you, even if you think this topic, if you have this topic on lockdown or that you don't need it, I want you to lean in. I want you to listen. And maybe after this podcast, do a little bit of research on your own, read some books that we're going to recommend, listen to some podcasts, and maybe even see a Christian counselor or a therapist that can help you work through these boundaries and help give you language and a new perspective on it. So all of that to say, I tried to rush through. That was a lot of information at once. You can see it all on our website and all in our show notes after today. So help me welcome today my friend and therapist, Jenni Starling.
Hello.
Hi, Jenni.
Hello.
That was a lot introduction, so sorry about that. But we had to get through that because I thought, when I was thinking about having you on, I was like, this really does good with starving and fasting.
Yeah, it does. Yes.
Because fasting is kind of like a boundary we put on ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love how you compared it to gluttony. That was wonderful.
Yeah. Because
that's great.
Anything that, like Chad preached about this last Sunday, and we learned that there's a lot of things in our life that can be out of place, out of whack.
100%.
He talked about, just in, even in our clothes spending, our closets, and how
absolutely.
the majority of the clothes we have in our closets, it's out of control. It's out of balance,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
From what we really need in life. And sometimes those things and those patterns, even though they're maybe not sin or deadly or whatever, they keep us from our full potential.
Absolutely. It's a distraction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're going to pair it with boundaries.
Love it.
Because I love this. I love the whole concept of boundaries. It really changed my life.
Yes.
Because you're going to get into some things and some patterns, especially women can have.
Yes.
Of having that sense of guilt and shame. And we're going to talk about that. And over trying to be everything for everybody.
Yes.
And we just can't do that. So let's start with our first question. How do you, as a therapist, define boundaries in the context of personal relationships and mental health? How do we define boundaries?
So the easiest way to talk about boundaries is if in therapy, in my therapy room, even with small children, I use the context of a house.
Okay.
We're a house, right? And in a house, you have typically a yard, you have a driveway, a garage, and that property line is what you are responsible for, right? You're responsible for maintaining it. You're responsible for cutting the grass. If a tree falls on your property, you've got to clean it up.
Yeah.
But outside of that property line is someone else's responsibility. If something falls in the street, guess who gets to do it? The city.
Mm-hmm.
If a tree falls in your neighbor's yard, guess who gets to pick that up? Your neighbor. So boundaries really are maintaining and taking accountability and responsibility for your property line and not taking responsibility for your neighbor's property line.
Yeah, I like that. That help us.
Yeah, it's just an easy kind of context to put it in.
And I like how you said before when we were talking previously, we don't need to see boundaries as a wall.
Yes.
We can see it more as a gate.
Yeah. So
what I open. So flesh that out, because we talked about that a little bit, just you and I back and forth in our emails and things.
Yeah. So often in therapy, you know, when typically I meet people, they're in an element of crisis, right? Something has gone wrong. And I meet a lot of people and they're like, well, I set a boundary. And then they describe the boundary and the boundary sounds like a cutoff. And I always try to encourage people that boundaries are in essence designed to actually make relationships better. They're not designed to cut people out of your life. So when someone comes to me and has defined a boundary as a cutoff, I always get curious of why. Why do you feel like a wall is needed? Why is a cutoff needed? And what would it take for you to move from the concept of, let's go back to the concept of a house, right? If you build a cement wall around your house, no one's going to be able to get in and no one's also getting out. It can also be very isolating for you. However, if you build a fence around your yard and on that fence you put a gate and the gate either has a key or a code, depending on whose gate it is, right? Then you have full authority of who comes in and out. If it's a key, you get to give people keys, but you also get to take people's keys, depending on what happens. But that doesn't mean that through work, they couldn't potentially get the key back.
Building that trust back.
Right. So a boundary to me is more fluid. Now, I always want to preface it by saying if it's a case of abuse, obviously a wall is needed, right? If someone is getting abused, you never want to use the concept of the gate because that person has hurt you, right?
Right.
But a wall is only needed in the most extreme cases.
I like that. Can you provide some examples of common boundary issues people face in their personal and professional lives? So maybe give us some examples of some boundary issues that you've seen in people's lives, maybe personally and professionally, maybe with their job or in relationships.
Yeah, so this is one of my favorite topics, and you and I talk about this even outside of this, but one of the books that if you've already read, you're going to hear me echo a lot of his words are Dr. Cloud's book, Boundaries. I think it is the quintessential book that everyone should read. It is biblical. He weaves it in with the Bible, and I think it's just a really good foundation on how to set boundaries in a really graceful way. But where I see people slip up is I think they get boundaries woven together with empathy. And what that looks like is people think that they I see this especially as Christian women. I'm just going to call this out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they feel like if they have boundaries, they can't have empathy. And not having empathy goes against their Christian values.
Yeah. Makes them a bad person.
Makes them a bad person.
Insensitive. And yeah.
Because I feel like as a Christian woman, it is my job to help everybody.
Yeah.
And if I'm not helping anybody, then am I living my Christian values? Right?
So you end up saying yes to every opportunity.
Yes.
Everything, every person. You feel like you can't say no to anyone. Your children, your spouse, your parents, whoever, your boss, those in need around you, your child's volunteer opportunities at their school.
You're just the yes person.
You're the yes person.
And I think in concept, again, I think in theory that's okay. But where boundaries are needed is when your property starts dying. Go back to the concept of the house.
Yeah.
So if you're out serving the community, right? If you're hosting a yard sale for your neighbor, if you're baking a cake for your neighbor who just had a baby, but your own house, the roof is falling off.
Yeah, it's crumbling.
Or your grass is dead.
Wow.
Right? You've got to water your own lawn.
You have to be healthy
in order to serve. And an empathy, how it's typically defined in context for this, is feeling someone else's. So to go back to that lack of boundaries, it's like, it's my responsibility to show you empathy. I have to feel it.
Wow.
And that's a huge responsibility for another human being to feel empathy for every single person they come in contact with.
Yeah.
I hear a lot of people that have struggled with boundaries say, well, I'm an empath, so I can't do boundaries. And I always ask the question, what would happen if you switched empathy with compassion?
I love that. Tell me more about that. Like, what would that look like?
So compassion, to me, how I view compassion is more of the holding, right? So if you come to me and you say, I'm having a hard time or something is going on in my life, I don't feel the need to fix it if I'm holding compassion for you.
Yes.
I can just sit with you in it, hold space for that, ask you what you need, and then I can move on.
Yeah. I can point you in a direction of health. Yeah.
I don't have to fix it. It's not my job to fix it.
Yes.
It's just my job to hold that space to help you.
Yeah, that's wise.
And so to me, boundaries and compassion are so connected because it allows me to water my own lawn. It allows me to go out of my gate to hold space for you so you can water yours. But I'm not neglecting mine in the space in that transaction, right?
Yes, because what I hear and what I see in a lot of women, especially, and we're just going to go there with women because typically we are more, compassionate.
Sure.
By nature. I know I don't want to stereotype, but is that so we wake up from the moment we wake up, we're giving out.
Yes.
And we are trying to make sure, our family's needs are met, those around us needs are met. And by the end of the night, we're falling into bed exhausted. We haven't had any time to refresh ourselves spiritually, emotionally, mentally, physically, anyway. And then we continue to give out because we feel like we have to, like you said, fix everyone's problems. If I'm not there, if I'm not the fix-it person, if I'm not the person showing up to the kids' school to volunteer for all the things, if I'm not the one at church making sure I sign up for every opportunity, if I'm not the person that, is there, whatever it is, answering every single phone call, every single need, then I'm a bad person. I'm a bad Christian.
That's right.
And it leads to depletion.
And I see it in men too.
Yeah.
Because men are fixers. And so often
that's good though. Yes.
If they can't fix it, they'll double down. Well, I know I can fix it. It's just a matter, I just haven't thought hard enough, right?
Yeah. Or tried hard enough.
Enough because it's my job to fix it. And the other day in clinic, I asked a gentleman, what would happen if you switched empathy and compassion? And it made him stop. And he's like, wow, I never thought about what it would do to the relationships around me if I just flipped that view. Because it's just a view. It's just how you look out the window. You can look out the window and say, it's my job to solve all the problems, right?
Yeah.
Or you can look out the window and say, it's just my job to hold space.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if someone asks you to solve their problem, that's a much different conversation.
Wow.
Right? Like if they come to you and say, I need your help to help me solve this, that's the invitation.
Yeah.
Right? But most people,
They're looking for the help.
they're looking for the help. That's the invitation. But most people don't say that. I mean, I would assume you would know that better than anyone.
Mm-hmm.
Most people just want the space to be held. They just want compassion.
I love that. That's really good. And that's a great way to see it, because I think that that's how Jesus shows us
Absolutely
compassion. He doesn't always swoop in and fix everything for us.
And so many people get that confused. They think empathy, right, that it's my responsibility to hold it, is being Christ-like. And
only one person can do that, and that was Jesus,
that's
and
right.
we are not him.
That's right.
Right? He
That's
held
right.
it all for us.
That's right.
But even now he shows us compassion.
That's right.
By holding space for us when we go to him and we pray.
That's right.
You know, he listens, he's there, right? But is your phone buzzing?
Sorry.
Her therapist. her
It's on my phone.
No, it's fine. It's live. We're good. But he holds that space for us. But he doesn't swoop in and fix all of our problems. He fixes us through us fixing our problems.
That's
sometimes.
right. That's right.
You know, many times. But he doesn't just snap a finger and it's all better, right?
100%.
So we can't put that on ourselves either. We are not God.
100%.
We are not Jesus. We are not the Holy Spirit. We can't fix all of this.
And so when it goes back to that concept of boundaries, to me, boundaries transcend both physically and emotionally and spiritually. You need boundaries so that your house and all the ways that make you whole can be whole.
Yeah. Yeah. Ugh, that's so good. So I hope that gives somebody freedom today. I really think that was like, when you emailed me that, I was like, let me hold that for a sec. Cause that's like a huge thing. I was like, let me think that through. But when you just explained it there, I was like, that's freedom for somebody.
I hope so.
That's freedom. I can hold space. And so give me some language around that. So somebody comes to you and they just kind of, I just say word vomit or emotion vomit on you.
Yeah.
And you want to be there. You want to listen. They're your friend, right? Or they're a person, an acquaintance or whatever. So you're listening, you're holding, but they don't ask you to fix it. Some people's initial reaction is, okay, let me help you. Let me fix this. Let me da-da-da.
Yeah.
But instead, what we're going to say is what?
My two favorite words are, what do you need? How can I help? Because again, it's the invitation.
Yeah.
When we assume and we fix, we just bypass the invitation and just show up to the party, right? We're just like, I'm here. But by asking, what do you need? And they could say something like, I just need you to pray for me. How can I help? Just continue to pray for me.
Yeah.
Or maybe call me in a couple of weeks and check on me.
Yeah.
Right? Then they tell you what they need, and they tell you what type of level of support they're expecting from you. And then you can say, I agree to that. Yeah, I can do that for you. Or you could say,
what if it's a big ask?
If it's a big ask, you could say, I hear you.
Or something out of your capacity, I should say. Yeah.
Let me send you a great therapist name. Her name is Jennifer Starling.
Yeah.
She can help you,
Or,
but you can outsource it too. I think.
Or I know this great program.
Absolutely.
Or our church has a great support group.
Let me put you in contact with someone.
Yeah.
Yes.
Let me point you in the right direction. I can do that.
Absolutely.
I can do that.
And that allows you, because again, there are so many relationships, both marital, friendships, that go sideways because there is not clear communication about what is needed and what can be provided. So to quote Brene Brown, clarity is kind.
My favorite quote of
mine
hers.
too. It's like, clarity is kind. So the clearer you can be with what you need and what you can do and what you can't do, so many things could be solved, because so many of the problems are just a miscommunication. Well, I thought you were going to do that for me.
That's good, Jenny. How can someone start identifying where their boundaries might be lacking or problematic in their life? And we might have a little bit touched on that, but go there. How can someone start identifying in their life where there are boundaries that might be lacking or problematic?
For me, I think the quickest way is, what relationships do you have that you feel like you are not watering your own lawn? Are there relationships in your life where you feel depleted?
Mm-hmm.
Or you feel there's relationships in your life that are unbalanced? Now, the truth is, relationships are not going to be balanced 100% of the time.
Yeah.
If you've been married for any significant amount of time, some days it's 90-10, some days it's 50-50, some days it's 100-0. It ebbs and flows. But when I say that, if there is a consistent relationship where you feel like you are depleted and you're not getting anything in return, I think that's a time to really look at, what is this relationship giving to me? Is there some place I need to put boundaries on it? What will that look like? Another place where I think it's very important to put boundaries is when you're around people who are very explosive.
Ooh.
And typically people who are explosive, it's just because they don't have the same skills to be able to communicate their own boundaries. And my language that I love to use around explosive people is, this is okay, this is not okay. And what that looks like around someone who might be explosive with anger, is, it's okay that this makes you mad. Okay. You don't like that and you're upset. Okay. That's okay. That's okay, because anger is an okay emotion. What is not okay is that you're screaming in my face.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. And so until you can figure out a better way to talk about your anger in a way that is not screaming in my face, I'm going to need to walk away.
That's a boundary.
That's a boundary. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't have to be a cut off. It puts the authority completely in their, in their boat.
Yeah.
And allows them to either figure out a way to discuss their anger in a more productive way or not. And then you get to make the decision on what you're going to do with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's really good. That's helpful. I like that.
Yeah. Boundaries don't have to always be so combative, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people think, if someone makes you mad and you just cut them off, you're like, well, I set a boundary.
Yes.
That's how most people define it.
Yeah.
Well, I set a boundary and they're no longer in my life.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, boundaries are supposed to make your relationship better. Like, go back to the anger. If the person comes back to you and says, you know what, you're right, I should figure out a better way to kind of like navigate my anger, that's going to make your relationship better.
Healthier.
For them and for you.
Right.
There's no losing there.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah.
I heard Dr. Cloud say one time, love and limits are not enemies.
That's so
and
true.
So I think a lot of times and I was like, that rings true to me, because I feel like so many times when we set limits or boundaries with people, we feel like we're not loving them, or they may say to us, if you loved me, you would, I hear that a lot of times with people that are trying to help their, addict friends or addict family members. Sure. The family member that's an addict may say, if you loved me, you would give me money. Well,
yes.
I love you. Therefore, I know I'm not going to give you money. I'm going to set a boundary, because I know what you're going to do with the money is not healthy, and it's going to continue in the pattern, right?
Yeah. And in that scenario, I would say the boundary is more for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you don't become an enabler.
Yep.
Because at the end of the day, they have the freedom to go ask someone else for money.
Yes. Yeah. And they'll find it somewhere.
They'll find it.
Yeah.
But the limit is for you, so you can love that person, even in that scenario, you can love that person, but also not be taken advantage of. That's where compassion comes in.
It's so good.
Right? It's just so woven together, because if you've ever had an addict in your family and you become an enabler, that's hard, because then you become resentful. And it's hard for you to have the compassion because you don't have boundaries.
Yeah.
You feel that taken advantage of. Yeah.
Let me see. Let me look through my questions here, because some of them we're moving through and they're so good. How does setting boundaries impact relationships with family, friends, and colleagues? So when you begin to learn when somebody begins to learn the concept of boundaries, and they begin to learn how to set those, okay, this is something new for me, and I'm used to being the yes person or the fix it person or whatever it is. And all of a sudden I start setting limits and boundaries in my life of those things, and then I get reactions or responses from people, what should they know about that? How does setting boundaries impact those relationships?
So I love this question so much. And when you sent it to me, I was like, yes, because this is the most important part of boundaries. So most people, when they pick up that boundary book, which I recommend every single person on the planet read, they read the first 2 chapters and they're like, or like halfway through the book, and they're like, yes, like I need to water my own yard. I'm putting up the fence. I'm going to start saying no, and I'm going to feel so much better. Right. So they just march along on this like boundary.
And everybody's going to love me, and they're going to understand.
They're so pumped. And I love when I see people, I'm like, oh yeah, you don't know what's coming.
Bless your heart.
What's coming is the backlash of boundaries, which I tell everyone is the most important part of Dr. Cloud's book, is the backlash from boundaries, is the, who do you think you are setting boundaries on me? The resistance to the boundaries, how that resistance is going to make you feel, how that resistance will make you go back to not having boundaries because that seems easier.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so that's the part that so many people are just not prepared for, which is why they don't hold the boundary. Because they just don't understand that that's a part of it. Right. And they'll come around and your relationship will get better. You just have to withstand that kind of zone of uncomfortable weight.
Yeah.
While boundaries are being set.
I like that.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Can boundaries be adjusted over time? And if so, how?
Absolutely. I think, what you have to weave in there is healing, repair, and that's the hope for boundaries, right? If I give you a key, but then have to take the key away, my hope is that you would earn the key back and you get access to the house again.
Right.
And so absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. How can individuals overcome resistance or guilt associated with setting boundaries? So,
third favorite question.
Yes. So we've got the boundaries. Now we're experiencing resistance, or and these may be simple things like in your professional life, your boss texting you after hours, right?
Yes.
And you feel the need to text back because if not, you feel guilty, or emailing you with projects, right? You've experienced this in the past in other previous jobs and things like that.
Yeah.
We all have. And we feel like we have to answer that person or answer that even just maybe a friend or a family member, whoever texts you whenever they want, however they want, or email you whenever they want. And we feel the need to respond, like I have to respond or they think I'm not listening, right?
That's right.
But a healthy boundary person begins to set those limits and either respond when it's their time or on their time, in a healthy time frame, obviously, or say, hi, thanks for sending this. A better way to communicate with me is, and you choose the route of communication.
That's right.
Or a better time to communicate with me would be, I'm setting a new limit in my life on whatever.
Absolutely.
This helps me. Thank you for helping me, or whatever. A person that doesn't have boundaries or a person that's resistant to that and they begin to feel that, they're going to respond, right? They're going to come back at them. So help us. How can an individual overcome this resistance in any situation?
Okay.
So any boundary set.
So help me stay on track.
And that was just one scenario.
Okay. So help me stay on track with how I'm going to answer this. I have two things I want to dig into. Okay. Let's stick with the response first. After the response, make sure I circle back to guilt and shame. Okay.
I will.
So the response, there is no better way. I want to go back to podcast 1. That I had with you when we talked about learning brain and survival brain.
Yeah, and if you didn't listen, go back to episode 8 and pick it up.
So good.
Yeah.
There is no better indicator on a survival brain person than their response to your putting up boundaries. If they respond with offense, like, who do you think you are? You have to pick up, you have to answer this email at 10 at night or, whatever the
pick up
answer
the phone or whatever.
That offense, that demanding, that black and white thinking, survival brain all day long. Someone who responds with, Absolutely. That makes sense. I'm sorry that I disturbed you late at night. I should put those boundaries in my life too.
Yeah.
Very learning brain, because they get it. They're like, oh yeah, that's a good gut check for me. I probably shouldn't have sent that late at night. Right. Yeah. And so I think their response really gives you a true measure of where are they? Yeah. Are they in survival brain or are they in learning brain? Mm-hmm. So that's how I personally unpack the responses.
Yeah.
So when somebody responds to me offensively, I'm just like that. Okay.
It kind of gives you a window into where they are.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So now
and you don't have to lean into that either.
No. And I don't.
Right.
I just kind of let it fill the space. Okay.
Yeah. And it's like Dr. Cloud said in one of his podcasts, he said, okay, thank you for letting me know that.
Yes.
He was giving a scenario one time, which I thought was really funny. He was saying this one family member, this couple was about to get married. They were engaged. And this one family member just thought that she had to give them all the advice. And, you should do this. You should spend your money here. You should buy a home here. You should do this and that. And felt like they had to just tell them everything. And if they did not follow what she said, they got very offended.
I guess.
And Dr. Cloud was teaching them, you just say, thank you so much for that advice. I appreciate you leaning. Well, why aren't you, well, we've researched it and we feel comfortable with the direction we're going. Thank you so much.
Right.
And just set the conversation.
That's
just,
right.
That
I love
is
that. I love
but
that.
But they want to go back, and he just said, you just have to set the limit.
That's right.
But sometimes many of us, when we set the limit, we feel guilt and shame coming, right?
Yes.
Ooh, we feel all of that coming on. So talk about guilt and shame and how it relates to this.
So guilt and shame, it's all about how you define things. And as I'm on this podcast longer, everyone will know I get really twisted up in how things are defined because I think clarity is kind. So what do they mean? So guilt, I always use an example in therapy is if I threw something at you and it hit you. Guilt would be, oh, I shouldn't have thrown that. I probably should have rethought that. I feel bad. I'm so sorry for throwing that and hitting you. That I should have rethought that, right? It's taking accountability for the action. That was my bad, right? Shame is I throw something at you. I'm the worst person on the planet. What kind of person would throw something at her? There must be something wrong with me. I'm a horrible person.
So guilt is what we do. Shame is who we are.
Yes.
Like we put the shame as this is who I am.
Yes. So when it comes to boundaries, when that pushback comes, it can really unearth some shame monsters, to use Brene Brown words, right? Because if you struggle with shame and the cycle of shame, which could be a whole podcast of its own.
Yes, because let me just stop here and put a little theological thing in this. What was the first thing that the enemy put on Adam and Eve when they sinned in the garden?
That's right.
Shame.
It's
the first.
It is so destructive.
Yeah.
So destructive. And you're absolutely right. It's so destructive. And so if you already struggle with that, when that pushback comes, guess what it's going to unearth?
Shame.
Yep. And that is the number one reason that people say, never mind. I didn't need that boundary anyway. Never mind. It's fine.
I'm a horrible person that I set this boundary with this person. And now their feelings are hurt and they're going to hate me forever. And da-da-da-da-da. And it's that cycle, that spiral.
Yep. And then you walk away exhausted still.
Yeah.
Your needs not getting met still.
You're depleted.
And you're depleted still. Yeah. Yeah.
Shame and guilt.
They're tough. And
you can feel
so
guilt.
Tough.
You can feel guilt without feeling shame.
100%. So the same flip that I would encourage people to take with empathy and compassion, just that shift, take that same shift with guilt and shame. It is okay to regret an action. Okay, regret it. But that doesn't make you a bad person.
Yeah.
Take accountability for the action, repair the action. But the shame of the not good enough behind it is just not going to serve you.
Because when we live in shame, our whole lives are out of balance.
Yes.
And we live in a constant perpetual state of reacting to everything around us because we're trying to cover that shame.
Survival 101. Yeah. Survival brain 101.
Wow. Yeah, that's really good. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
So we're moving toward the end of my question, because this has been a lot to unpack. And like I said, all of this information, Dr. Cloud's book on boundaries will be in the show notes. If you're not a reader, and maybe just download it on Audible. And when you're when you're walking or cleaning the house, or, driving in your car to work, listen, feed your soul so that your mind, your will, and emotions can become healthy. That's the whole person. That's what salvation is all about, that my whole being can be made right with God.
That's
that
right.
When I'm saved, my spirit man becomes right with God, right? But that sanctification process, that working out my salvation, is where my soul comes in. My mind, my will, and my emotions. It takes time for God to begin to heal that and work in that and change those things to become more like Him and to respond more like Him. So we have to do the work.
Yes.
Through time in prayer and Bible study and listening to the voice of the Holy Spirit, and maybe getting into some healthy, godly counseling and therapy to help us unpack the things that we can't see. Because I know that one of your things and how you do it is you begin to ask questions so that the light bulb can go on in areas of our lives that we maybe have never even considered.
Yeah, and I want to put in there, I don't want anyone to listen to this podcast and it invokes shame, right?
Right.
That listening to this and go, oh, I don't have boundaries.
I'm a horrible
person. I don't have boundaries. There are so many behaviors that we act out that are habitual, that are generational.
Yes.
That, to your point, we just don't know any other way until someone shows us another way. And then to your point, the light bulb goes off and you go, oh, I can do this different than maybe how I was raised, or I have the authority over my own yard to change this habit that I didn't even know was a habit.
Yeah.
So I'm hopeful that this podcast will give someone hope.
I do
hope
too.
that, you don't have to have relationships that are unfulfilling. You can restore balance in your life. And while boundaries are hard, I think we'll both agree it's the hardest practice in my life.
Yes. And I'm not always perfect.
Same.
Yeah.
Same. I practice boundaries. I do it well in some places and I do it not so well in other places. But I think the practice of boundaries make my relationships more balanced.
Yeah.
And it makes me more balanced because of it. Yeah.
Well, if people want to get in touch with you and begin to set up maybe an appointment with you to come and talk to you, your schedule is quickly full.
It is so full.
You now accept insurance, Blue Cross Blue Shield.
I do,
saw
yes,
on your
Blue Cross
website.
Blue Shield. Mm-hmm. Yep.
But how can they get in touch with you, Jenni? And I'll also put it in the show notes.
Yeah. So our the practice that I am with is now changed to the Nest. I love our new name. So it's called the Nest Therapy Group. I'm in Gulf Shores and Fairhope. And you can just email me at jstarling.counseling@gmail.com.
Okay, perfect. And it may take a few days to get you on the schedule or get them on the schedule.
Yes.
But
I'm on a short wait list, but I'm trying to move through it as quickly as I can.
Right.
So if everybody can just get on my wait list and be patient, I'm moving through it as quickly as I can.
That's awesome.
Yep.
Okay. Maybe a fun last question.
Yes.
What's one of your favorite things that need to be on our radar? We talk about this at the end of every podcast. I like to ask everybody so it helps people get to know you a little bit better. So what's one of your favorite things that maybe somebody else needs to try?
So I am a boy mom.
Yes. Boy moms.
So boy moms. So I have had to adapt what I define as fun according to what?
Yes.
The house that in which I live.
Yeah.
So I've become an advocate of beach fishing.
Beach fishing.
Yeah. So we go to the beach.
But you guys you live on Fish River, right?
We do.
Yeah.
We do.
Okay.
But we will pack up everything and we'll go to Johnson's Beach or we'll go to Fort Morgan and the boys will catch just everything, pompano to they've caught sharks. And I get to sit in my chair and read a book.
That's lovely.
It's not a bad day.
Right. And then when he holds the fish, you can act like you've been watching the whole time.
I take a picture and I post it and it's all great. But one of my favorite beach fishing memories is my son was like, Mom, we're going to wake up before the sun gets up.
Oh, gosh. Okay.
And I'm like, Dean, what? And he's like, yes, we're going to wake up at like 3:30 in the morning and we're going to drive to Fort Morgan and we're going to get there and we're going to watch the sunrise. And I Jennifer, I was not happy.
Right.
I was not my best self, but I did it. And then we got out there and Dean's like, it was worth it, right, Mom? And I was like, 100%, it was worth it. It was the best memory. And so
our kids sometimes help us live in the moment, don't they?
Because I would have never have done that because I would have slept.
Right?
Because I would have slept.
I'm going to need a few more hours.
Yeah, but that was the best 4:00 in the morning wake up I've ever had. It was great. One of my favorite memories. Yes.
It's precious. And we have the common connection because both of our boys are adopted.
Yes.
And so we have that connection that we always like to talk about.
I know.
They're special.
A whole nother podcast in and of itself.
A whole nother podcast. And how you got Dean is a miracle story.
Yes.
And I love that story.
He's a good one.
Well, thank you, Jenni, for being here today on Coastal Conversation. I know this conversation helped a lot of people. I know at least it got maybe the hamster in the wheel turning.
Yes.
So that they can think about some of these topics that we've talked about today.
Yes,
especially boundaries. So thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to this week's Coastal Conversations podcast. All of today's references will be found in the show notes. Also, if you enjoyed listening, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. We'll see you at Coastal this Sunday as we pick the conversation up from here.